The FBI is sitting on over 10,000 hours of surveillance, layered with cell tower pings and license plate scans from the night Nancy Guthrie vanished. And yet, not a single official word about the vehicle. Not one. That silence isn't random, it's calculated. Because there's a critical detail hiding in plain sight, something most coverage has completely overlooked. The FBI doesn't stay quiet when it lacks answers. It goes quiet when it's guarding something explosive. Here's what we can confirm. At 2:36 a.m., a vehicle slips into frame on a Ring camera just 2.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home. 8 minutes earlier, at 2:28 a.m., Nancy's pacemaker connection drops. The distance between those points? A 6-minute drive. The sheriff acknowledged the timeline aligns. The FBI acknowledged the timeline aligns. And then everything stopped. 10,000 hours of footage. Multiple camera captures of the same vehicle. A license plate tied to a real identity. Cell data mapping exactly which phones moved through that stretch of darkness. And still silence. At the center of that corridor are two men. One of them was the last person to bring Nancy home, just 4 hours before she disappeared, and he hasn't spoken publicly in 38 days. The other fits the FBI's physical profile of the shadowy figure on her porch closely enough that investigators have never cleared him. The Bureau isn't guessing about that car. They're circling it, building around it, and the quiet you're hearing right now, that's not confusion. That's pressure building. That's what it sounds like when a case is closing in. So let's break down the numbers, because the numbers don't just tell a story, they corner it. At exactly 2:28 a.m. on February 1st, Nancy's pacemaker app disconnects from her phone. That moment isn't random, it's forensic. It marks the instant she was separated from her device. Either the phone was taken out of Bluetooth range, the connection was deliberately cut, or Nancy herself was moved beyond the limits of her own home network. Different scenarios, but they all point to the same chilling truth. She was being moved. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie was no longer where she was supposed to be. 8 minutes later, at 2:36 a.m., a car glides past a Ring camera on Camino Royale, a quiet stretch sitting 2.5 miles from Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills. NBC's Liz Crokin retraced that exact route, deliberately avoiding main roads, choosing the kind of back-channel path someone would take at that hour if they didn't want to be noticed. The drive? 6 minutes. Now do the math. 2:28 plus 6 minutes lands at 2:34. The car appears at 2:36. A 2-minute gap. But that gap isn't a flaw, it's a fingerprint. 2 minutes is hesitation. It's the pause at the end of a street. Checking mirrors. Pulling off a disguise. Slowing your breathing. Making sure no one saw. It's the moment someone shifts from execution to escape. That 2-minute window doesn't weaken the timeline, it locks it in. And when the Pima County Sheriff publicly confirmed that the vehicle's timing aligns perfectly with their investigation, that wasn't speculation. That was the lead agency drawing a line, and everything points back to that car. Now, shift your focus to the vehicle itself, because this is where the story stops feeling random and starts feeling engineered. Retired NYPD Detective Pat Broen examined the footage and came to a precise conclusion. The vehicle is a Kia Soul, a compact crossover, ordinary, quiet, practically invisible. The kind of car that blends into the background so completely that even if someone notices it at 2:30 in the morning, their brain dismisses it instantly. Nothing flashy, nothing memorable, and that's exactly the point. This wasn't convenience, it was selection. A vehicle chosen not for power or space, but for anonymity. Former FBI agent and forensic analyst Tracy Walder went even further. She analyzed what the suspect was carrying and described it as a transport kit. Zip ties, tape, restraint materials. Not tools for theft. Not tools for breaking in. Tools for control. Tools for moving a person. Now combine that with a Kia Soul, rear seats folded down, interior space cleared, and a suspect standing between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, matching the FBI's measurements. That's not chaos. That's planning. That's an operation unfolding exactly as intended. And then there's a route, because where that car went may be just as important as what it carried. Camino Royale feeds directly into East River Road, a quiet but strategic corridor stretching across the northern edge of Tucson. From there, the map splits into 3 immediate paths. Head south, and you're on Oracle Road, straight toward the city, and eventually Interstate 19, a route that runs all the way down to the Mexican border, just 60 miles away at Rio Rico. Turn west, and you're cutting through residential zones toward the exact area where one of the key figures in this case lives and works. Go north, and you reach Oro Valley, the suburb where Tommaso Keon teaches AP Biology and where he shares a home with Annie Guthrie. Or take the fourth option, east, and you disappear into open desert. Sparse homes, dry riverbeds, remote trailheads. Former Nassau County Lieutenant Michael Gould made it clear. In that terrain, within just a few miles, a body could remain hidden for months, maybe longer. Every direction is more than a route, it's a possibility, a theory, a connection. And at 2:36 a.m., all of them were open to the driver of that car. The FBI knows which path was taken. They've tracked it, but they haven't said a word. And that kind of silence, it's never accidental. It means one of two things. Either they're keeping the driver in the dark, or they already know exactly where he went, and they're waiting. Now we come to the two names that refused to disappear from this case. Tommaso Keon was the one who dropped Nancy Guthrie off at her home at 9:48 p.m. on January 31st. At 9:50, the garage door opened. He stayed until she was safely inside before driving away. That makes him the last confirmed person to see her alive. Hours later, at 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera is tampered with. That leaves a gap, 3 hours and 57 minutes, between the last known sighting and the moment an unidentified figure appears at her door under cover of darkness. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos publicly stated that members of the Guthrie family and their spouses, including Keon, have been cleared. That statement exists. It's official. But here's what doesn't get said. Being cleared in a public statement is not the same as being cleared in federal investigation. Cleared doesn't mean finished. It doesn't mean impossible. It simply means that right now, there isn't enough to charge. But investigations evolve. Evidence shifts. And one piece of forensic data can redraw the entire map overnight. Consider this. The FBI returned to search Annie and Keon's residence not once, not twice, but 5 separate times. 5 entries. That's not routine. That's targeted. Law enforcement does not revisit the same property over and over without a reason. Each return signals a specific objective, something they're chasing, something they haven't closed out. 5 searches in an active federal case point to sustained and unresolved interest. And publicly, no explanation. Then there's the physical evidence. The FBI's forensic team constructed a controlled environment, erecting a white tent over Nancy's front entrance to recreate the exact lighting conditions from that night. They ran tests, reenactments, infrared measurements, agents dressed in identical clothing, replicating the suspect's movements frame by frame. And the result was precise. The individual captured on that porch stands between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches. Not a guess, not an estimate, a measured range. And once you lock that detail in, the list of possibilities starts getting a lot smaller. Several investigative journalists took a different approach, studying photos of Keon standing beside people with verified heights. Across multiple comparisons, the conclusion stayed consistent. He stands close to 6 feet tall. Some estimates placed him around 183 centimeters. And that's where the numbers start to separate. Because if the individual on that porch measures between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, and Keon is hovering near 6 feet, then the two don't align. That isn't a declaration of innocence, it's a data point. And data doesn't end investigations, it redirects them. What remains on record is this: Keon has not spoken publicly. Not once. 38 days and complete silence. No statement, no appearance, not even standing beside Annie during public appeals. Meanwhile, Savannah released multiple emotional videos. Annie cooperated to the extent that investigators searched her home and seized her vehicle. Her brother Cameron went on camera and spoke directly to whoever took Nancy. And Keon, nothing. Behavioral experts say that in cases like this, innocent family members tend to be visible, desperate, emotional, relentless in their need to be heard. But individuals facing potential legal exposure behave differently. They choose their words carefully. They limit visibility, because every sentence can become evidence. 38 days of silence in a case this intense isn't accidental, it's deliberate. It's a decision repeated every single day. Now shift to the second name that keeps surfacing. Dominic Evans entered the public spotlight on February 4th when records from the Pima County court system revealed a criminal history tied to his name. Multiple outlets verified the charges independently: felony burglary, robbery, theft, embezzlement, DUI. Evans broke his silence once. On February 25th, he gave an interview to the New York Times. In it, he claimed he had only met Nancy Guthrie a single time, at an Easter gathering back in 2011. Investigators spoke with him for roughly 40 minutes during the first week of the case, and according to him, they never followed up after that. His alibi: he says he was home with his wife and children the night Nancy disappeared. His wife backed that up. Phone data appeared to support it. Sheriff Nanos even expressed sympathy toward Evans, suggesting he might consider legal action against those spreading unverified accusations. To be clear, Evans has not been named as a suspect. He hasn't been charged. He hasn't been arrested. But what does exist is a profile and a record. The FBI's description of the individual on that porch is specific. Male, between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, average build, dark facial hair visible beneath a mask. Former FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente pointed out something else, what appears to be a marking on the suspect's right wrist in infrared footage. Possibly a tattoo. If confirmed, that single detail could eliminate or implicate someone instantly. Now compare that to Evans. His documented height falls within that exact range. His build matches. His facial hair aligns with publicly available images. He lives in Tucson, and his criminal history includes burglary, defined under Arizona law as unlawfully entering a structure with intent to commit a felony. That definition mirrors what the footage suggests. A figure moving through a gated entry without visible force, navigating a private property with a level of familiarity that doesn't look random. It looks practiced. And then there's the connection, the thread tying everything together. In April 2007, Evans met Keon through a Tucson weekly ad. They formed a band. They worked together. They stayed connected for 19 years. 19 years of shared time, rehearsals, trips, conversations. And during every one of those years, Keon was married to Annie Guthrie, which means every interaction between Evans and Keon existed within that same orbit. Over nearly 2 decades, information doesn't stay contained. It leaks. Details slip into casual conversation. Addresses, routines, vulnerabilities, security setups. Evans says he only met Nancy once, but that's not the question investigators are asking. The real question is, how much did he already know? Now circle back to the vehicle, because that decision may be the clearest signal of all. That car wasn't random. It was chosen. And the route it followed wasn't guessed, it was known. The back roads between the Catalina foothills and the arterial exits of northern Tucson aren't obvious to someone unfamiliar. That kind of navigation comes from experience, from repetition, from someone who's driven those roads before without needing directions. Keon lives in Oro Valley, directly accessible by heading north from Camino Royale. And records confirm he traveled between his home and Nancy's residence on known dates, including the night of January 31st. Which means one thing is certain, he knew that. Evans lives within Tucson's reach, westbound from the very same East River Road that connects to Camino Royale. Keon sits to the north in Oro Valley, accessible from that identical corridor. 2 different directions, one shared pathway, and at 2:36 a.m., that vehicle moved through the exact stretch that places both men within reach of its route. 2 individuals tied together by nearly 2 decades of friendship. 2 individuals linked directly or indirectly to the last confirmed moments of Nancy Guthrie's life. And then the evidence tightens. DNA changes everything. 2 separate genetic profiles emerge. One recovered from a glove found 2 miles away from Nancy's home, uploaded into Cody's, returning no immediate match. The second, a mixed biological sample collected from inside the residence, still undergoing separation and analysis. 2 contributors. 2 individuals whose DNA intersects at the same crime scene. And now, forensic investigative genetic genealogy is in motion on the glove sample. A family tree is being constructed, quietly, methodically. It only takes one relative, one distant connection inside a commercial database to begin tracing a path back to a name. The odds that both contributors have managed to keep every extended family member out of every genealogy platform? Practically non-existent. Arizona law requires DNA collection for qualifying felony convictions. Burglary is one of them. If Evans' prior conviction resulted in a recorded DNA sample, then that profile has already been compared against the glove. If there's no match, investigators already know one thing with certainty: he didn't leave it behind. But the second profile, once fully isolated, will be run regardless of criminal history. That process doesn't announce itself. It doesn't leak. It simply delivers a result. And when it does, the gap between that car at 2:36 a.m. and the identity tied to it begins to collapse. So this is where the case stands, stripped down to its core. A vehicle captured at 2:36 a.m. A pacemaker signal lost at 2:28 a.m. A 6-minute drive connecting the two. The sheriff confirmed the alignment. The FBI confirmed the alignment. These are not assumptions. They are established facts forming the backbone of this investigation. And circling those facts are 2 names. One man, the last to see Nancy alive, who has remained completely silent for 38 days while the family around him fractures in public. Another man whose physical profile fits within the FBI's defined range, whose past includes unlawful entry, and who spent 19 years close enough to absorb the private details of Nancy's life through proximity alone. That vehicle ties them both to the same corridor, the same road, the same calculated decision made in the early hours of the morning by someone who didn't need directions because they already knew where they were going. That choice wasn't random. That familiarity wasn't accidental. And the investigation, quiet, deliberate, and relentless, has been following that knowledge back to its source since February 2nd. Behind the scenes, the net is tightening. Genealogy databases are expanding outward. Cell tower records have already been mapped. The vehicle is being cross-checked against registrations, license plate readers, and thousands upon thousands of hours of footage, reviewed frame by frame. And hanging over all of it is a number, $1 million. A reward large enough to test loyalty, large enough to break silence. Because silence doesn't last forever. Loyalty doesn't last forever. But evidence doesn't forget. That car was captured. That glove is in a lab. Those cell tower logs are locked inside federal files. And somewhere at the end of that growing genealogy tree, there is a name waiting to surface, whether anyone chooses to cooperate or not. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has been gone for 38 days from a home she lived in for over 50 years. This wasn't random. She was selected, observed, planned for, taken through a secured gate in under an hour, in total darkness, by at least 2 individuals who left pieces of themselves behind, on her property, and along the path they used to escape. They didn't vanish without a trace. They carried her somewhere, and the evidence already knows more than it's saying. The distance between that footage and the truth is shrinking. And when it disappears, when the vehicle, the DNA, the digital trail, and the genealogy all converge on the same identity, the silence that has lasted 38 days won't matter anymore. Not because someone finally spoke, but because the truth no longer needs permission to surface. She deserves to be found. And this story is not finished. If you have any information regarding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. That's 1-800-225-5324, or submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. You can also reach the Pima County Sheriff's Department directly at 520-351-4900. The FBI is offering a $100,000 reward. The Guthrie family is offering $1 million. Bring her home.